In my last video, I made the marble track using a bunch of different segments I built. These were just cut out and then soldered together manually. I clamped the individual pieces onto the board using a bunch of these orange clamps, and then would solder down the little connectors. For any of the curves, I just took a piece of wire and then manually bent it around a form. This worked pretty well, but I wanted to try making more complex shapes. In another video, I built this wire form. And to do that, I actually 3D printed a template. So this template here has a groove the size of the wire. It's one continuous shape that goes all the way through the form. And then placed the wire into that groove and bent it around all the corners to create this shape. So I wanted to see if I could combine these two ideas together. Could I use a 3D printed template and the wire for the marble track and put them together to create some more complex segments? So here's what I came up with. It's actually a relatively big 3D printed piece, but it's the same idea. There are pairs of grooves that are in the 3D printed piece. They're meant to guide the wire track. Here's a much more complex shape that actually goes around a full circle and then exit backs out. I also made some simpler ones. Here they're actually overlaid. So one is a 90-degree bend around the corner. The other one is more of a horseshoe shape. Let me show you how I bent the wire using this template. So I have a piece of wire. I just straightened it out a little bit. We're going to be bending it around this form, so I don't need to worry about it too much. So the key with this is to go pretty slow. So you seat it down in the groove and then just bend it ever so slightly, going back and forth. You can actually just shove this down in the groove, but the problem is the wire has its memory. So if you just push it in, when you pull it back out, it will bounce back closer to its original shape, which is not what we want. We want it to hold the form. So back up and keep going around. Go around the loop. You'll see it's sticking out a little bit. I found a pair of needle nose pliers was good to help seat the wire. And this likely won't be exactly flat when we pull it out, but that's okay. We can fix that later. Go around the loop. Potentially we go around a couple times. I'm just going to go around once. So there we go. We have the wire going all the way through. Back out. Okay. Snip off this extra piece. We can do the same again for the inside track. So now we have two pieces that are shaped in the form of this crazy track. You'll notice when I printed this, I actually put a bit of a chamfer on the edge. That way it's easier to get the wire to seat back down. So now when I pull these off, I don't actually expect them to retain their shape, but they should be pretty close. Particularly the Z-axis is likely going to be off. So let's pull it off and see how we did. That one's pretty close. Now this one expanded out some more, so the radius isn't quite right. All that's close. So now we have the two. These actually overlap, so we need to interlace them with each other. So now we have a track segment. I'm going to do this loop. All right, next piece is to solder this up. Okay, to solder this up, I'm going to clamp it down on this board temporarily. Now this one's actually a loop, so it's a little bit more tricky. I'm actually just going to do it piece by piece. So I put the pieces down approximately where they need to go and clamp them. Now one is the reveal to be about right. So this one's not in the right spot. It needs to move over. There we go. So now we have approximately uniform gap all throughout this. Clamp it down. And now I'll put a connecting piece right here. Okay, so we'll position the connecting piece. It doesn't need it all the way at the end. We can solder those together later. Get the solder. Okay, so that's the first one. So now I'm going to put one a little ways down. I think around here would be a good spot for the next one. This gap looks pretty good to me, so I'm just going to go ahead and place one. Okay, so now we have the first two on. Now we're going to need to put another connector over on this side, but it's not clamped, so I'm going to take the clamps off and reposition. This is a loop, so I'm just going to spiral around my temporary clamping board here. Clamp it down. So now the gap's not quite right. The inside radius and the outside radius don't match. So I think what I want to do is pull the inside in. Okay, that one there looks pretty good. We'll deal with the other ones later. That one's good. Let's continue that process. Clamp it down and solder the rest of it up. Now it's a little bit tricky. We have to be able to solder underneath the top. Okay, then I want to put like one more in here. Go. Here we have it. We got a loop that goes all the way around. So you'll notice here this gap isn't very big. So like we'll need to spread it out some this way. Perfect. Let's try it out. Great. So now you can see how we made this. The shape doesn't align exactly, but it's really, really close. And then we just go and make a bunch more. Here's another one I made. This one I twisted the other way. The top and bottom is different. So this one here, this leg's on the top, this leg's on the bottom, so they'll go the other way. Here's this little zigzaggy piece. That's these here. Let's actually go like that. And again, there's a mirror piece. This one that goes the other way. Bunch of those. And from this form, I made a bunch of these curves. It's 9-degree bends. And then these U's. So that's how I built all the individual segments. Next, we'll go and assemble the marble track. Off camera, I went ahead and built my platform. This is a piece of foam core. There's actually some extra pieces sandwiched underneath and then wires poking through. And this is just CI glued together. That creates these uprights. And then these uprights will be the support for the marble track. here's the finished marble run. You can see all the segments have been joined together. So what about the 3D printed forms? Are they worth it? For the simpler shapes, these horseshoe and the bends, I'm not so sure. These bends are actually relatively easy to bend by hand. For the more complex shapes, I do think it's worth it. Particularly the spirals. So these pieces right here, I tried to bend some of those manually before and I had a really hard time. So getting the loop around, actually this piece really helped a lot. So I think the more complicated the shape, the more useful this would be. For simple shapes, I think you could just go ahead and bend them manually.